The cold seeped through the thin wool of her dress, a familiar companion in the desolate stone chamber that had been her home for a year. A year since Alpha Alaric had stood before the pack and declared her unworthy, his lip curled in disgust at the faint, puckered mark on her cheek. He had called her a blight, a curse upon their prosperous Silver Moon pack. And everyone had believed him. Alara believed him. The mirror showed her a plain, forgettable face, eyes the color of dishwater, and the ugly, pale line that marred her skin. It was a face no one could love, a face that had sealed her fate as an outcast. The heavy oak door groaned open, and it was Alaric himself who stood there, his imposing frame filling the doorway. He did not look at her, his gaze fixed on a point on the wall, just above her head. "You are to be wed," he announced, his voice devoid of any warmth. Alara's heart, a fragile thing, stuttered in her chest. Wed? Who would ever want her? The Black Alpha King of the North demands a bride to seal the new treaty, Alaric continued, a cruel smirk finally touching his lips as he looked down at her. King Kale. He is a man who values practicality over beauty. I have offered you. It is a great honor. You will bring peace to our packs. A great honor. The words were ash in her mouth. She was not an offering of peace. She was a piece of refuse being discarded. The Black Alpha King was a name whispered in fear around campfires. A ruthless ruler of a savage, mountainous kingdom, a king who had never been seen to smile. They were sending her to a monster, a final, brutal punishment for the crime of being unwanted. Her pack's relief was a palpable thing in the days that followed. The pitying glances were easier to bear than the scorn she was used to, but both felt like stones pressing down on her, suffocating her. No one defended her. No one said goodbye. She was simply a debt being paid, a sacrifice pushed onto an altar she could not see. As she was bundled into a guarded carriage, she did not look back. There was nothing to look back for. She was Alara, the worthless, the rejected, and she was riding to her doom. The journey north was a brutal affair, mirroring the desolation in her soul. The carriage wheels churned through mud and then snow as they climbed into the jagged, pine-choked mountains of the Blackwood Kingdom. The Silver Moon guards who escorted her spoke to her only in grunts, their disdain a constant, oppressive weight. They saw her as the pack's shame, a burden they were finally unburdening. Alara spent the long days staring out at the blur of dark trees, her mind a maelstrom of fear and resignation. She had spent her life making herself small, invisible. Her only joy had been in the quiet woods behind her pack's village, where she learned the language of herbs and tended to the small creatures who did not judge her face. She had once healed a fox with a broken leg, and for weeks it had followed her like a shadow, a silent testament to a kindness no one else saw. That small memory was the only warmth she carried with her into the biting cold of the north. When they finally arrived at the Blackwood Keep, it was more fortress than castle. It was a terrifying marvel of black granite, carved directly into the side of the tallest mountain, its towers scraping a sky the color of slate. It was a place of immense, unforgiving power, a perfect reflection of its master's reputation. Alara was hurried from the carriage, her head bowed, and she was met not by the king, but by a line of tall, stern-faced women dressed in gray. They took her from the Silver Moon guards without a word, their efficiency chilling. She was led through cavernous, torch-lit halls where armored warriors stood like statues, their gazes passing right through her. She was taken to a suite of rooms that were larger than her entire life's dwellings, yet felt colder than the stone cell she'd left behind. A fire roared in the hearth, but did not warm her. The attendants moved around her with silent purpose. They drew a bath scented with pine and lavender, stripping her of her travel-worn clothes with impersonal hands. They washed her hair, their fingers firm and practiced. They dressed her in a gown of simple, unadorned white silk that felt impossibly soft against her skin. And then came the final, most unnerving part. One of the women brought forward a veil. It was not a delicate lace affair, but a thick, heavy sheet of woven silk, completely opaque. It was lowered over her head, shrouding her in a world of muted white. "It is the tradition of our kingdom." One of the women finally spoke, her voice low and raspy. "The bride is not to be seen by any, not even the king, until she stand before him at the binding ceremony, to be unseen." It was a familiar state, yet this felt different. It was not neglect, it was a rule. She was no longer just invisible. She was deliberately hidden, a secret to be kept until the moment of her final judgment. The days leading to the ceremony bled into one another, a featureless expanse of time spent in her luxurious prison. She ate the fine meals they brought her, slept in the vast, lonely bed, and stared at the world through the suffocating filter of her veil. She was a ghost haunting her own life, waiting for the end. The loneliness was a living thing, a predator that stalked the edges of her gilded cage. One night, sleep refused to come. The silence of the keep pressed in on her, and a desperate need for air, for a single glimpse of the moon, drove her from her bed. Cautiously, she slipped out of her chambers, her bare feet silent on the cold stone floors. She followed a draft of cool air down a corridor and through an archway, finding herself in a small, enclosed garden. It was a pocket of impossible life in the heart of the stone fortress, filled with night-blooming flowers that glowed a faint, ethereal white under the sliver of a moon. And she was not alone. A figure stood in the deepest shadows, his back to her. He was tall and broad, wrapped in a dark cloak, his presence an anchor of stillness in the quiet garden. He was kneeling, and as Alara's eyes adjusted, she saw he was tending to something small and whimpering on the ground. A wolf pup, its leg caught in a cruel iron trap left carelessly by a gardener. The man's hands, large and calloused, were surprisingly gentle as he worked to pry the metal jaws apart. Without thinking, Alara moved forward. "Let me help," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. The man froze, his head turning just enough that she could feel the intensity of his gaze, even though his face remained in shadow. He said nothing. Ignoring the fear that prickled her skin, Alara knelt beside him. "There are herbs in this garden," she murmured, her eyes scanning the flower beds. "Silver thistle. It will ease the pain and cleanse the wound." She found the plant easily, crushing the leaves between her fingers to make a rough poultice. She offered it to the man. For a long moment, he simply stared at her veiled form, and then at her outstretched hand. He finally gave a short, sharp nod. While he held the pup still, she gently applied the herbs to the raw wound. The pup's whimpers quieted to a soft whine. "You have a healer's touch." The man's voice was a low, deep rumble, like stones shifting in the earth. It vibrated through her, a strange and unsettling comfort. "Who are you?" She flinched. "I am the bride," she stammered, expecting him to recoil. Instead, he was silent for another long moment. "Fear is a cage," he said at last, his voice softer now. "Sometimes the door is not locked." He carefully lifted the now calm pup and rose to his full, intimidating height. Without another word, he turned and melted back into the shadows of the keep, leaving Alara alone with the scent of crushed silver thistle and a sliver of impossible hope. She did not know that she had just met her future husband, the fearsome King Kale, who was now returning to his study, utterly captivated by the scent of a veiled stranger and the echo of a voice that promised a kindness his world had never known. The day of the binding ceremony arrived with the gray, solemn light of a winter dawn. The great hall of the Blackwood Keep was a cavern of echoing silence and immense power. Hundreds of wolves, alphas and their emissaries from every allied kingdom, filled the tiered stone benches. They were a sea of grim, powerful faces, all turned towards the empty dais at the front. A special delegation had been given a place of honor near the front. Alpha Alaric and his chosen warriors from a Silver Moon pack. Alaric sat with an air of smug satisfaction, eager to witness the final humiliation of the girl he had cast away. He wanted to see the look on the Black King's face when he finally unveiled his plain, scarred bride. It would be a story told for generations. Alara was led into the hall by her silent attendants, a spectral figure in white silk. The heavy veil was a mercy, hiding her from the thousands of eyes she could feel boring into her. Each step towards the dais was a step towards her execution. She was a lamb being led to slaughter, and the entire world had gathered to watch. Then she saw him. The Black Alpha King stood waiting, and the rumors did not do him justice. He was a giant of a man, clad in black armor that seemed to absorb the torchlight around him. His face, harsh and angular, could have been carved from the mountain itself. But it was his eyes that captured her, a startling, piercing shade of gold that seemed to see straight through the veil, straight into the terrified heart of her. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through her as their gazes met. It was the same overwhelming presence from the garden. The High Elder began the ancient rite, his voice droning on, but Alara heard nothing. Her entire being was focused on the king before her. The vows were spoken, her whispered assent lost in the vastness of the hall. Then the moment came. The High Elder proclaimed, "Let the bond be sealed. Let the king see his queen." A profound silence fell over the hall. Time seemed to stop. Alpha Alaric leaned forward in his seat, a cruel smile playing on his lips. King Kale raised his hands, his movements slow and deliberate. His large, calloused fingers, the same fingers that had been so gentle with the wolf pup, brushed against the silk of her veil. He lifted it. As the fabric fell away from her face, it was not just Alara who was revealed. A ripple of pure silver light exploded from her, so bright that many in the hall cried out and shielded their eyes. The light washed over her, and the ugly, glamorous magic that had shrouded her for years shattered like a pane of glass. The dull, dishwater eyes ignited, becoming a vibrant, mesmerizing shade of twilight forest green. The plain features sharpened into an aristocratic beauty that was breathtaking, almost divine. The pale, puckered mark on her cheek vanished completely, replaced by flawless, luminous skin. And for a fleeting second, a glowing silver crescent moon, the ancient, sacred mark of the moon-blessed, shone upon her forehead before gently fading from sight. A collective gasp swept through the great hall. Jaws dropped. Alphas rose to their feet in disbelief. Alpha Alaric's face went white with shock, his smug smile collapsing into a mask of horror. But King Kale saw none of it. He was not merely struck by her beauty. The instant her true face was revealed, the fated mate bond he had only read about in ancient prophecies slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. It was a tidal wave of 1,000 lifetimes of searching, of an ageless loneliness he hadn't known he carried, of an immediate, all-consuming possession. Her scent, the one that had haunted him from the garden, now had a name. Mate. This was not a political bride. This was his other half, the one he was born for. His voice, when he spoke, was a low, dangerous growl of absolute certainty that silenced every other sound in the hall. Mine. Ignoring the stunned silence of his court, Kale stepped forward, his golden eyes blazing with a potent mix of awe, fury, and a devotion so profound it stole Alara's breath. He gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing the spot on her cheek where the cursed mark had been. "They hid you from me," he murmured, his voice a raw, private thing meant only for her. "They tried to hide the moon itself." Alara stood frozen, drowning in the intensity of his gaze. She saw no disgust, no disappointment. She saw worship, the word that had echoed through the hall. Mine, reverberated in her soul, planting a seed of a truth she had never, ever dared to dream. Mate, the goddess had not abandoned her after all. The spell was broken by a choked, furious sound. Alpha Alaric, his face contorted with rage and disbelief, stumbled forward. "My king, this is a trick, a deception," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "Do not be fooled by this sorcery. This is Alara, a cursed, worthless omega from my pack. She is nothing. She was never meant to be a queen." Kale did not even deign to look at him. He kept his eyes on Alara, but his power, cold and lethal, rolled off him in suffocating waves, directed entirely at the fool who dared to speak. He pulled Alara protectively to his side, wrapping a possessive arm around her waist. Then he slowly turned his head, and the temperature in the hall dropped by 20 degrees. "You dare," he snarled, each word a shard of ice, "to speak of my queen, your true Luna, with such filth." He finally looked at Alaric, and the full, unrestrained power of the Black Alpha King was a terrifying sight. "You had a moon-blessed wolf in your midst," Kale's voice boomed, reaching every corner of the hall. "A direct gift from the goddess, a sign of her highest favor, and you cast her out like refuse. You called her a curse." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You rejected her." The last two words were spoken with a quiet, lethal contempt that was more chilling than any shout. Kale's gaze swept the hall. "My royal line has waited 5 centuries for the return of the moon-blessed mate, whose coming was prophesied to unite the kingdoms and bring an age of unrivaled strength. The dark glamour that hid her was a coward's magic, meant to keep her from her destiny. Meant to keep her from me." He looked back at the trembling, shattered form of Alaric. "You did not reject a worthless Omega, you fool. You rejected destiny itself. And in doing so, you have rejected the alliance with the Blackwood Kingdom. Your pack is a blight. You're no longer welcome in my lands. Leave now." Utterly broken, Alaric stared at the magnificent, powerful woman Alara had become, saw the absolute adoration in the eyes of the most powerful alpha in the world, and finally understood the catastrophic scale of his blindness. He was shoved and dragged from the hall by his own pack members, their faces burning with the shame he had brought upon them all. With their tormentors gone, the hall felt cleansed. Kale turned his full attention back to Alara, his expression softening instantly. The entire court, hundreds of the most powerful wolves on the continent, watched in stunned silence as their formidable, unyielding king did something none of them had ever seen. He went down on one knee before her. Taking her small hand in his, he bowed his head in a gesture of ultimate respect. "Alara of the Blackwood Kingdom," he said, his voice now gentle, but ringing with unwavering conviction. "My fated mate, my queen, forgive me for the fear you have endured. I did not know it was you I was waiting for all this time. My life, my heart, my kingdom, it is all yours now and forever. Will you accept me?" Tears, hot and cleansing, streamed down Alara's face. They were not tears of sorrow, but of release. Every cruel word, every look of disgust, every lonely night, it all washed away under the warmth of his golden gaze. She looked at this incredible, powerful man, her mate, who knelt before her, and for the first time in her life, she saw her true reflection in his eyes. Not an ugly duckling, not a worthless Omega, but a queen. A beloved, cherished queen. "Yes," she whispered, her voice clear and strong, resonating with a newfound power she didn't know she possessed. "I accept you, Kale." He rose, his face alight with a joy so pure it transformed his harsh features. He slid a heavy, black gold signet ring, the symbol of his rule, onto her finger. Then, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was not a kiss of conquest, but of homecoming. The entire court erupted in a single, deafening roar of celebration and approval. The bond between them settled deep in her chest, a warm, golden light that healed all the broken places inside her. She was home. She was loved. She was, and always had been, worthy. Standing beside her king, her hand in his, Alara faced her new life, her past a forgotten shadow, and her future as bright and limitless as the moon she was blessed by. Never let the world tell you who you are. Your worth is not defined by the opinions of those who are too blind to see your light. Like Alara, you may have a hidden strength, a beauty that the world has tried to cover up. Believe in your own destiny. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner queen. Comment below with what you thought of Alara's transformation. We love hearing from you.